Hey, what's up guys? Welcome to the channel. There has been a bunch of fight announcements this week, and I believe because of those UFC leaks, Dana White went on a podcast. There were some screenshots from that podcast of Dana White's War Room where they had future fights laid out, and I believe the UFC decided, you know what, all these leaks are already out there. We might as well confirm the fights that we do have as official right now. And so I already made a couple videos about some of these fights, and I will link those in the description, but I wanted to make a video about the entire main card of UFC 276 because one fight I have not talked about is the main event of UFC 276, and being that it's International Fight Week, July 2nd, one of the biggest pay-per-views of the year, I figured why not make a video particularly talking about the main event, as well as there is a co-main event to this card that was not on the board that has now since been confirmed. So first off, the fights that I've already done dedicated videos on, I'm only going to talk about a little bit, and I will link all those videos down in the description, but I want to talk about every fight on the main card as it seems right now. And again, not all these are 100% official. I'll tell you the ones that are confirmed. So first off, opening up the main card, we have Sean O'Malley versus Pedro Munhoz. I made a dedicated video on this. You can check it out. But the reason the UFC has booked Sean O'Malley opening up the main card of UFC 276 is just because they're trying to build Sean O'Malley as a star. He's already a very popular fighter, and what they do is they try to put future stars, or who they perceive to be future stars, on big cards that they know a lot of eyeballs are going to be on. So if they have a great performance, a lot of new fans get exposed to those fighters, and that's exactly what they're doing with Sean O'Malley here. They put him on UFC 264 last year, the Conor McGregor, Dustin Poirier 3 card, and now this year there was talk of him being on UFC 274, which is this weekend, but the UFC said no. I guess they wanted to put him on UFC 276, and this is a great fight. I'm super interested in this fight. Sean O'Malley has one win over a fighter currently on the UFC roster, which is just absolutely insane, and that's Raulian Paiva, and I really want to see him test it against a world-class fighter, and Pedro Munhoz is that test. And if Sean O'Malley can beat Pedro Munhoz in impressive fashion, I will be impressed. I know a lot of people will downplay Pedro Munhoz. He's lost, I think, 4 out of his last 5, and they will try to devalue the win. But I, for one, who have been highly critical of Sean O'Malley, will be impressed if he's able to beat Pedro Munhoz. And I'm wondering, it's been talked about for a long time, will Sean O'Malley ever get that rematch with Chito Vera after that first fight where Chito Vera just brutalized the leg, hit that nerve, and then pushed Sean O'Malley to the ground and flash KO'd him with brutal elbows, and then O'Malley was stretchered out of the cage with no serious injuries. And I'm curious, I think that would be a mega fight. Marlon Vera is making himself known as a top 5 bantamweight fighter, and if O'Malley can make his way up the rankings and we can get a potential #1 contender fight in the future, that would be a huge fight and a great storyline for Sean O'Malley, seeing if he can avenge that loss where he was stretchered out of the cage with no serious injury. Moving up the card to a fight that I don't think a lot of people are going to care about, Lauren Murphy versus Miesha Tate. Now, I'm not super interested in this fight. This fight is at flyweight. Miesha Tate is moving down to flyweight. She retired for like 4 or 5 years, came back, fought Ketlin Vieira, looked absolutely atrocious. Some of the worst striking I've ever seen in my life. Lost to Ketlin Vieira. And what this fight is the UFC is trying to find more contenders for Valentina Shevchenko. If Miesha Tate can go out there and beat Lauren Murphy, there is no doubt in my mind she will be next in line for Valentina Shevchenko if Shevchenko does in fact beat Talia Santos. Miesha Tate here, they know she has name value. She fought Ronda Rousey multiple times. People know who Miesha Tate is. So if she can beat Lauren Murphy, they will give her a flyweight women's title shot next. Moving up the card to a fight that is confirmed, Alex Pereira versus Sean Strickland, and what an amazing middleweight fight. And not only is this a #1 contender fight, in my opinion, just because Israel Adesanya has kind of cleaned out the division, you look at Alex Pereira, if he's able to beat Sean Strickland, what a storyline that is, having those wins over Israel Adesanya in kickboxing, one time KOing him. That is a great storyline. And Alex Pereira, I've said in the past, I said when the UFC signed him to the roster, I said they kind of need to baby him a little bit. And, there's not a lot of wrestling heavy fighters within the middleweight division. So maybe avoid those fighters for Alex Pereira so he has a better chance to make his way to the top of the division, considering Israel Adesanya really has beat beaten everyone in the middleweight division at this point in time. And if Sean Strickland can beat Alex Pereira, I don't know who else is left for Israel Adesanya to fight. There's really not anybody for him to fight. He's beaten Vettori twice. He's beaten Robert Whittaker twice. He absolutely starched Paulo Costa and outclassed him. There's not a lot of options. So if Sean Strickland can go out there and beat a phenomenal kickboxer in Alex Pereira, Sean Strickland will probably earn himself a title shot. And this will be awesome because it's on a big card, so people will remember Sean Strickland if he does get the big win. I don't feel like a lot of people, Sean Strickland and Alex Pereira, neither one of those are household names. If they can get a big win on a huge card like this, then, most likely they're going to be next in line for that middleweight title shot. And maybe we'll get some hype behind that middleweight title fight. Moving up the card, this is a fight that's not official, and I'm not so sure is going to happen. Khamzat Chimaev versus Nate Diaz. Now, this is an absolute matchup that I hate. Nate Diaz would get absolutely mauled by Khamzat Chimaev, and the reason the UFC is doing this is because Nate Diaz is trying to fight out his contract. Now, I've already made a dedicated video on this fight as well, so I'm not going to talk about it too much. But Khamzat Chimaev would wreck Nate Diaz. Nate Diaz has no chance fighting Khamzat Chimaev. Stylistically, Khamzat's a grappler. Stylistically, Nate Diaz does terrible against grapplers, especially wrestling heavy. Nate Diaz is not a career welterweight. I do not want to see him fight Khamzat Chimaev. I want to see Khamzat Chimaev either fight Colby Covington, Leon Edwards, or Kamaru Usman for the title. I have no desire to see this fight. And if Nate Diaz takes this fight, he's an absolute savage. But I would have no problem with him taking this fight and then going out there the second the referee says, let's go, just tap out or have your corner throw in the towel. I don't want to see you get smashed by Khamzat Chimaev in a pointless fight. Khamzat Chimaev is at the top of the welterweight division. Nate Diaz isn't ranked anywhere. Nate Diaz just has star power. And I get why the UFC would want to do it, because if Khamzat goes out there and absolutely smashes Nate Diaz, maybe he absorbs some of that star power, but I have no desire to see this fight. I'm not going to talk about it anymore because this matchmaking, and I really don't think it's going to happen. I think it's probably 50-50 because Nate does want to get out of his contract, so maybe he just takes the fight just so he can get out of his contract. But I have a hard time believing Nate Diaz has a history of being willing to sit out. I think he will sit out for longer just not to have to fight Khamzat Chimaev because he knows, regardless, he's a fighter, he knows what will happen to him in a Khamzat Chimaev fight. And I'm a huge Nate Diaz fan. And I know a lot of people say, oh, the stamina, he'll come back in the later rounds. Well, it's not going to happen. Okay, moving on to a fight that was not in the screenshots, the co-main event, which is now confirmed. Alexander Volkanovski versus Max Holloway 3, the trilogy that we've been waiting for. And I am so excited for this matchup. Two razor close fights, particularly the second one, split decision for Alexander Volkanovski. We've been hearing for years that Max Holloway is the uncrowned champion. I personally scored the first two fights for Alexander Volkanovski. I thought the first fight was cut and dry. Second fight was razor close, could have went either way. And I'm just finally ready to put this behind us. I want to see who's the better fighter. I believe it's going to be Volkanovski, but I want to see Max Holloway get his shot. And I don't want to hear anybody crying about Holloway getting this third shot because Holloway could have probably waited around and maybe got a third shot against Volkanovski without fighting anyone. He went out there and he beat up Cater. He went out there and beat Yair Rodriguez last November. So Max Holloway is one of those guys where he's not just going to sit around. He wants to stay active. And I'm curious, it's been a little bit now since they fought. What kind of adjustments can both guys make? Max Holloway in particular, dealing with those leg kicks, dealing with the movement of Alexander Volkanovski, dealing with the power of Alexander Volkanovski. I'm curious what kind of adjustments he comes in to try to dethrone Alexander Volkanovski after losing to him twice, because it's a must-win for him. If he loses the third fight against Alexander Volkanovski, he has to go to lightweight, and I don't know how much success he can have at lightweight. So the main event is not official yet for International Fight Week, but just looking at the UFC roster and the champions right now, I believe it has to be this fight. So I believe this fight will happen on the card. And that is Israel Adesanya versus Jared Cannonier. Israel Adesanya has cleaned out the division. He's fought Robert Whittaker twice. He's fought Marvin Vettori twice. He has a win over Brunson. He has a win over Paulo Costa. Jack Hermansson's coming off a loss. Darren Till is on a losing streak. There's nobody left for Israel Adesanya to fight outside of Jared Cannonier. And I know Jared Cannonier is only on a 2-fight win streak, but He's a top-ranked guy. He's coming in off that KO over Derek Brunson in that super fun fight where eventually Derek Brunson's corner threw in the towel. But Jared Cannonier with nasty bombs, hurting Derek Brunson badly and finishing him. And that's a quality win over a top-ranked guy. Before that, a win over Kelvin Gastelum. I thought he actually lost that fight, but it was razor close. It could have went either way. And before that, he had a loss to Robert Whittaker. So even though he's only in a 2-fight win streak, you look at the middleweight division, there was no one that deserved this fight more than Jared Cannonier. Now, me personally, don't get me wrong, I'm excited for this middleweight main event. But at the same time, I don't think this fight is going to be super competitive. You know, if you had to draw up a perfect stylistic matchup for Israel Adesanya, it's Jared Cannonier. He moves forward. He throws heavy shots. Not particularly fast. Doesn't have the best footwork. Israel Adesanya is going to pick him apart and either finish him or win by decision. But Jared Cannonier does have that puncher's chance. But for me, I'm not counting on that. I don't think Jared Cannonier wins this fight. So while it's still a fun main event, and I know Jared Cannonier is going to show up to fight, I just think Israel Adesanya is going to win this fight. And what gets me most excited is looking at a fight and thinking how competitive it's going to be and thinking, oh my God, either guy can win. And I really don't see a path to victory for Jared Cannonier in this fight outside of maybe landing a nasty leg kick and injuring Israel Adesanya like he did to Anderson Silva, or maybe clipping him with a massive punch. But I don't think that's going to happen. Israel Adesanya is an amazing striker. We've seen it time in and time out. Look what he did to Paulo Costa. I don't think Jared Cannonier is going to be able to dethrone Israel Adesanya. So overall, this is a great card, 2 title fights. And another thing I wanted to mention before I go, Alex Pereira versus Sean Strickland. If Jared Cannonier gets injured or Israel Adesanya gets injured, one of those guys could step into the main event. Could you imagine a scenario where Jared Cannonier pulls out with an injury and Alex Pereira steps in instead of fighting Sean Strickland? Only 2 wins within the UFC, and now he's fighting for the middleweight belt. That would be incredible. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Don't forget to like the video, and thank you so much for watching.